We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
A warmer for the hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. He'll also be with me in segment number 1. Here at the top of the show, I have to talk about what has been the last week for LSU. We really didn't get a lot of headline news and notes in college basketball on Friday, the biggest one being John Blackwell is going to return to school, which we all thought was going to be the case with the bag of money that Duke is giving them. But here in the first segment, we'll talk with Rob about LSU, all that we're seeing there, how to just gauge his team in general, because we don't know who's going to be eligible at this point, just the landscape that they are setting here. So it is very, very interesting to say the least. And then we'll talk with him a little bit more about the SEC landscape and those NBA draft decisions in part 2. Then in the final segment, we did see some nice transfer moves in college basketball on Friday. I'll give you guys a little bit of a recap of that. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, by the way, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, maybe does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg of you, I do plead with you, please send in those Twitter/X questions. Help the offseason go by a little bit quicker. And how about if we dive in with our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does such amazing work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. This time of year, he's doing a great job on the baseball front, but he does a great job doing so many different things. He's looking at this great game of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. I know that he is dialed in with regards to what we've been seeing in the football season as well, getting set for the NFL and college football seasons and so much more, and does some great work over at Underdog Fantasy as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And my goodness, man, college basketball and college sports in general just continues to make news, even when it's not even in season for half of these sports. And I don't know whether that is great for the entertainment factor or semi kind of destroying it, but we're going to find out one way or another kind of talking through today, I think.
Absolutely. And the team that has captured our attention over the last few days, in case you've been living under a rock, LSU has signed, I believe now, 3 different NBA draft picks, and they are trying to bring back the former Big East Player of the Year in R.J. Lewis. And just before we look at the betting implications, before we look at the actual roster makeup, what the team might be, what have you, just what are your thoughts on this? Because this is not the college basketball that I remember as a kid, and heck, this is not the college basketball I remember from even like 24 months ago.
Yeah, we are long from the days of, a guy like a Jimmer Fredette, for example, playing out multiple seasons at BYU.
A decade ago, it was a crime to give a guy like free peanut butter with a bagel, and now here we are signing a 2020 draft pick.
Right, and the college basketball programs are paying out more and incentivizing more than literally pro teams in Israel. I mean, we are in a very interesting water where, obviously LSU, this whole kind of wave, especially with Yam Madar, who was playing professional basketball in Israel, was just given $5 million to sign with the LSU Tigers. And the thing is, on top of that, they attracted a guy who was on the Boston Celtics, was a G Leaguer, and R.J. Luis. Somehow, the NCAA sphere of incentives, paying players, still being somehow viable under the eligibility guidelines, it has led to the most interesting roster construction I think we've ever seen, with a coach that obviously is going to pull out all the stops. He's done it before and during NIL, and that's obviously going to continue with Will Wade.
With Will Wade, we always know that it needs to be like, it's the old photo that you see on social media. He's like, get in there and make this all about you. That is Mr. Will Wade to a T right there. So that's interesting. And I think we have to ask this question as well. how many of these guys do you think are actually going to be eligible? Because Mo Diabate is going to be good to go. I think that Bashir is going to be as well. So LSU has, at the very minimum, 5 guys that should be able to suit it up this year. They have the one international guy that's 19. That's acceptable. But it looks like about half the roster is a big giant roll of the dice. And if they actually get these guys eligible, they have a lot of talent. And if they don't, they're very, very much a wet match in a dark cave, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when you have 7 players that are north of the age of 22, and your youngest player in an 8-man rotation is 20 years old, and he's also a transfer, I mean, you are cultivating something that has never been seen at the college basketball level. And heck, a hilarious article. Shout out to, I think it was Yahoo Sports, or it was, one of these kind of aggregate, news followers that was reporting on this. And they basically did a breakdown of the San Antonio Spurs roster and their age. And LSU in its current state is older than the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, the reality is that college basketball now is a semi-pro league, and the incentive makes it the highest and most incentivized semi-pro league. And kind of to your question of, okay, how many of these players end up actually kind of sticking through this cloud of eligibility weirdness? I mean, I have no idea anymore. Find a corrupt judge, find somebody that's going to side with you, find any sort of stop that you can pull out. And honestly, the NCAA has not shown enough backbone to go after these types of schools, these programs, these types of moves with a lot of vigor. And it's led to just the weirdest time, I think, in college basketball history. And we're just trying to piece it together as we go, because yeah, prior to this whole, thing taking place, I don't even know.
Yep, you are so right. We are trying to piece it all together. I feel like we're in a actual human version of the game of Whose Line Is It Anyway? And for those that remember that great show with Drew Carey, the motto of the show is everything's made up and the points don't matter. Well, the eligibility certainly does matter, but everything is truly made up right now. It's Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast. Rob's the best. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And let's say these guys actually are eligible for LSU. How do you think this is going to go? Because obviously there's talent. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They instantly become a top 4, top 5 most talented team in the SEC. They also have absolutely no chemistry whatsoever. Many of these guys actually play with international rules rather than college rules. And I think this will be a very, very interesting experiment if these guys are actually eligible.
Yeah, with how many EuroLeaguers they have on this squad, even, Yam Madar coming over from Israel, at this point, it's like they're going to be I think the nation's leading goaltending team, because in international rules, if the ball is sitting on the rim, you can dunk it home. I'm sure that'll end up potentially being a stat that's displayed, because kind of to your point, not only are they building through the NBA G League and also, the Israel, professional basketball scene, they're bringing over 3 EuroLeaguers. They're bringing over Mo Diabate from Kentucky. They're bringing over a guy in Abdi Bashir that we've kind of seen go from Monmouth to Kansas State over the last couple of years. And even, Divine Achukwu coming over from Michigan State. Like, this is a team that's cultivating, this is hoarding a lot of talent. I mean, those are prominent schools that a lot of those guys are coming from, or a lot of prominent basketball scenes, including the freaking NBA. I mean, again, we saw this last year with Alabama kind of play out with trying to bring in a G Leaguer midseason, and it kind of backfired on them. I don't know how kind of the stickiness of an RJ Luis's situation is, but if they can somehow figure out how to get him on the roster, you're adding a true NBA G League level talent who is kind of on the cusp of making an NBA roster. And I think we've seen him at his peak. When he's right, he's one of the best players in college basketball, and this team could be very, very good.
Yep. I mean, it's quite literally adding in their ringers and trying to make it legal. So that's interesting to say the least. As Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's the best, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And no question, the last week or so, it's been all about LSU with regards to the buzz, with regards to everything that's been happening, but there's been a lot of moves made out in the SEC here in the offseason. Heck, there's going to be a lot of moves made in the next few days because a lot of the SEC teams are involved in these NBA draft decisions. We'll talk about that with Rob on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, and now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time Guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson. He does such an amazing job with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets over on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. He's doing great work over at Underdog Fantasy. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB. And in segment number 1, we had to talk about LSU, the circus that is LSU, but I'm lost in the shuffle of LSU. It's been an incredible offseason year in the SEC. Man, when it comes to the SEC, we have seen a lot of fireworks this offseason. Teams typically doing things a little bit more on the up and up right now than LSU, but how do you take a look at this SEC landscape? Because Kentucky seems to be a big disappointment here in the offseason. They're still looking for that star player, but outside of that, Florida's muscled up. Tennessee has been able to muscle up. Georgia, another team that's even left in the dust, but like even at school like South Carolina has made some nice ads here, and for the SEC after that historic year 2 years ago, I think that they looked at last year's and Erica was here down year because it was still pretty good, and they really want to get back to where they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, I think we're starting to see, and you and I have talked about this at length about certain programs that are kind of getting jaded by the NIL era, because although the NIL era opens the door for a lot of ability to kind of almost reinvent your program with new identities every single year, if you were living in the doldrums but you had a good endowment, you could go out there and try to make it a massive 1 year turnaround change. I mean, heck, we kind of saw it even with like Iowa and Ben McCollum in year 1 by bringing in all that transfer talent, and it led to an Elite Eight. Same thing with Nebraska. Same thing with a lot of these different schools. The downside is, say, like Kansas State, where they invested the last 2 years very, very heavily in the transfer portal, and it was a dumpster fire in back-to-back years. How does your endowment, how do those boosters, how do the people that are kind of fueling your program, wanting you to go out and get those types of guys, feel about the results of their money being basically wasted down the drain? I think, again, that can lead to the jaded side of NIL where, yeah, there is an opportunity, but there's also an opportunity to throw dollars away in the eyes of a lot of these alumni. And so a team like a Kentucky, for example, kind of the roundabout way of getting there is last year they dumped $20+ million into a roster that got bounced in big time fashion against Iowa State in the NCAA tournament with an injured star. How does that make people feel about the new age Kentucky Wildcats under Mark Pope? I think there's a permanent stain until he somehow gets over the hump himself. And so from that standpoint, I think a lot of teams are in that boat when you look at the SEC, because there was a feeling of kind of a window of time for a lot of SEC teams to get into the dance, and a lot of them just kind of showed up mediocre or flatline last year. It'll be interesting to kind of see who are the investment teams in that SEC range, because ultimately it could be a team like a Texas A&M with unlimited money, a good season last year under year 1 of Buckyball, and everybody else kind of in the SEC also just kind of being like, hey, we didn't have the most ideal season, and that could really kind of breed that middle ground of the SEC to be the teams that kind of leap into the top end of the conference.
Yep, I am right there with you, and I think that is going to be really interesting to look at, as well as we do have Rob Donaldson, who's doing such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to what we're seeing in college basketball right now, transfer portal has been a little bit quiet here over the last few days, but a lot of that is because of the NBA draft decisions. As we know, there's a few guys that are both in the NBA draft and the transfer portal. And what are you looking for these next few days? Because that deadline is coming up this next week, and I think that there's a lot of big decisions that are going to be shaping what we're going to be seeing in college basketball, and ironically enough, many of them involving the SEC.
And that's, again, I think the good part of NIL. The bad part of NIL, objectively speaking, is the lack of continuity, right? You don't get players that are tethered to programs anymore, the same way that if you look at the NBA and you see all these super teams every single offseason get formed, you no longer have Kobe in LA or Allen Iverson in Philly or Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming and Dwayne Wade in Miami. Like, there's no city ties, there's no program ties in college basketball anymore. It's a very, year by year sport at this point. And the positive side of NIL is that when you do look at the players who are on kind of that cut line of the lottery, not really kind of guaranteed minutes or even a spot on an NBA roster, let alone a really good payday. If you're an NBA level talent, you can get paid some serious dollars in college basketball, and you can carve out your career, or at least financially start it right there in that league, rather than taking this massive leap to the NBA where who knows if you're foregoing eligibility at this point, but that's supposed to be the case. And from that standpoint, it makes it a very interesting dynamic of player retention in college basketball. Now, they might not go back to the school they came from, but at least the college basketball game is heightened as a result of retaining more talent, kind of to all this kind of roundabout point of monitoring these decisions. Absolutely. When you have NBA players literally coming back to college basketball or potential NBA players thinking about staying within college basketball, it's definitely a benefit. It changes the trajectory of a lot of these team seasons, and a lot of these teams are begging and pleading and offering some serious dough to keep those guys in-house in their college programs.
At this point, I am wondering if LSU is going to try to find Shaquille O'Neal and Perry Ellis some eligibility. I mean, man, right. LeBron James, I'm coming home. Kevin Durant, my next decision. Like, my gosh, it's just so hilarious. We are going to be seeing men with gray hair out there on the floor at some point in college basketball. So it's interesting. And Rob, you're doing a great job of being able to decipher it all. You're always tied in on college basketball. You're doing a great job on the baseball front and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking ball with you, whether that's on the baseball front or the college basketball front. And we've got a lot of time to go before we get college basketball games left in our life. But along the way, kind of building up to that point, if you do want to follow my bets on a daily basis, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
It is always great to be able to get Rob aboard every single time he joins me. He lends such great insights. He did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and events we saw in college basketball on Friday.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by our guy, Rob Donaldson. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Only one draft decision. John Blackwell is going to be returning to Duke. We all knew that this was going to be happening. This is not news. He was averaging 19 points per game over at Wisconsin. Duke is was inking him to a nice amount of money. He did an okay job in the draft process, but I never thought that he was really going to be skyrocketing up boards. That is certainly not the case. Duke is going to be locked and loaded. They're going to be right there with Florida as one of the top teams in all of college basketball entering into the season. We don't need to touch much more upon that because this was a foregone conclusion. Now, what we do need to talk about is that meet the Roadrunners keep on adding guys, and I don't know if it's going to be panning out for them. I hope it does because I love saying meet the Roadrunners in a very, very nice way. But Ashton Smith, he last season was playing over at South Dakota. He's decided that he is going to UTSA, and it's been a banner last 72 or so hours for them. They add in there Isaiah Watts, who wasn't great over at Maryland last year, but a few years ago, he was pretty rock solid with the Washington State Cougars. I know that they added earlier in the offseason Josiah Legree, but also they've added a few other mix and match guys like Damari Williams from Houston Christian as well. And I do think that for Smith, who he had his season last year cut very, very short due to injury, that he's going to be able to make a nice impact. Last season, he was limited to 6 games, and in those 6 games, he was only averaging about a half a point per contest. Previous year, he was averaging more like 4.5 points per contest. A guy that began his career over at Texas A&M. He's got upside at 6'9". He should be able to give a little bit of rim protection with UTSA needs, and UTSA is still probably going to get pounded on the glass, but I've been asking them because they've done a great job in terms of bringing in some guard play to be able to bring in a little bit of something down low. This is apparently their answer. Are they still going to get decimated down low out there in the American? Yes, but at the very least, they now add a little bit of size, so that's a step in the right direction for them. I mentioned this in passing with Hampton because Hampton, they've made quite a few moves here over the last 48 hours. They're bringing in their Adam Nanji, who 2 years ago over at Iona was their main point guard, who was averaging over 4 assists per contest. They're also now bringing in Aaron Davis. He last season was playing over for Bryant, and he was a solid player. 9.5 points per game, shot 36.5% from three-point range, 6'7", a little bit of a combo player, and he was a part of a Bryant team that was pretty solid on defense. They were absolutely atrocious on offense. He very much knows the way of the Hampton Pirates, so that's interesting to say the least, but I do feel like Hampton has done a solid job here in the offseason. The man that I mentioned, Nanji, I think it's going to be able to instantly be able to elevate this backcourt. Additionally, you've got Max Frazier is coming in. I liked him over at Central Connecticut. Seth Hubbard, he's solid now. The three-point shooting is still a little bit lacking, but Davis is going to be able to provide a bit more of that. That's really been the main bugaboo for Hampton these last few seasons. Hampton has been a solid team down low, and I think that they are going to be once again. So, like what I'm seeing here, Drusas Sankis, he was over at Charleston this last season. He has decided that he's going to be adding on over to Cal Baptist. 2 seasons ago, he was averaging about 5 points per game as a 6'6", little bit of a combo player. He redshirted last year, and for Cal Baptist, as we know, with Rick Croy leaving to become an assistant over at Arizona State, it's a team that is in a little bit of chaos right now, and they're, if I'm not mistaken, switching conferences as well. But I did like the pickup of Ethan Duncan from Lipscomb. That should be able to help them out quite a bit. And with regards to Nick Reichert, he's a guy that is 6'10". He's going to be coming over from Charlotte as well. So this is going to be a nice few ads for them. For Stankis, he's a guy that shot 37.5% from three-point range over at Charleston. He's a 6'6" guy that's going to be able to stretch a floor. So I do think that Cal Baptist is trying to make the best of a bad situation. Probably going to be a little bit of a down year for them, but I do think that this is a pretty solid one for them. You've got Cortland Muldu, he was over at Washington this last season, averaged about 3.5 points, 2 boards per contest. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Georgia Tech. For Georgia Tech, I do like what Scott Cross has done. Now, are they going to be in the bottom half of the ACC once again this year? I don't think that there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're relying upon a lot of mid-major guys to be able to fill the void, but he's a guy that I feel like was probably a little bit underutilized after being a top 250 recruit out there in the great state of Washington. They bring in their Jackson Fields, who should be able to help out down low from West Virginia. Kobe Garland is a nice go-to scorer. He comes over from San Jose State. Victor Valdez, he follows Scott Cross on over from Troy. Nasir Whitlock was a go-to scorer over at Lehigh. So they've got an eclectic group of guys. I don't necessarily know how this is going to look for Scott Cross over at Troy. His teams were pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers, hitting the glass last few seasons. He always has a little bit of a different style, it feels like, year in and year out, but I think that he's going to be a nice cog, and I think that he's going to be seeing some good minutes out there in the backcourt. Chris Lockett, he was over at Jacksonville this last season. He's heading on over to Jacksonville State. And it's actually different states, by the way, because when you hear Jacksonville State, you think, oh, it's in the state of Florida. No, Jacksonville State is actually in Alabama, so he's actually switching states here, so that's interesting to say the least. But that said, he was a pretty solid scorer this last season over at Jacksonville, the old Dolphins. He was able to put in there right around about 9.5 points per game, shot only about 30% from three-point range, but began his career over at Boise State. I think that he's going to do a nice job fitting this Jacksonville State system, one that always is reliant upon good, strong defense. The offense typically leaves a little bit of something to be desired, but I always just like the system in general with regards to what you're able to get out of these guys in general. Typically, they do a nice job on the glass. For Jacksonville State, they've had quite a few guys. Leon Horner III is an upside guy that comes over from Texas Tech. Cash Pollock from Arizona State as well. Jordan Steinke is going to be able to give you some go-to scoring. Daniel Tobabla, he was over at UC Riverside, 7-footer. Didn't see great minutes, but I think that he's got upside. Along Grant Groznik, who you just didn't see a lot of minutes over at Long Beach State, but I do like what this team has done. The Harper system is one that I trust in, and I think this is a good pickup for them. Christian Beam, he was over at Georgia State this last year. 7'1" big man. He needs to work on the offense. He averaged less than 4 points per game, but he was able to supply about 4 rebounds per game. He's only about 6'6", but he was able to give the team darn near a block per contest as well. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Temple. We give out a link if and go Owls. So I do think that this is going to be relatively solid for them. For Temple, they've been needing a little bit more size. They've been needing to hit the glass a little bit better because they just seemingly always get decimated year in and year out down low. Now, the Adam Fisher style, because he was a disciple of Micah Shrewsbury when he was over at Penn State, it is based around good guard play, nice three-point shooting, what have you. But still, I do like the moves that Temple has been able to make. I do think that this is a sort of an ad that is going to be able to help them out quite a bit. They're still a bit vulnerable down low, but they bring in Jordan Marsh, who was a nice scorer over at USC previously out there in the Big South. Sir Isaac Heron should be able to help with the defense coming over from Louisiana Tech. Jason Drake is a nice upside guy coming in from Indiana. So I think that's starting to come together. Still probably going to need a little bit more down low, but he's going to be able to help out on that front. Jonathan Grimmin, he was a nice little post player over at Cal Baptist last year, about 6.6 rebounds per game. I mentioned Rick Croy. He took a assistant job over at Arizona State. Well, he's following Croy on over to Arizona State, and this Arizona State team is going to be great this season. Like, I'm buying in right now for this Arizona State team. They're going to be playing slower. Obviously, they have the coaching change with Randy Bennett coming on over from St. Mary's. He brings over Paulius Barsukis over with them. He brings over Dylan Shaw as well. Emmanuel Incente from the WCC. He comes over from Gonzaga. He's a nice go-to defender. Ben Defty is a 7-footer. Like, Arizona State might leave a little bit of something to be desired with their three-point shooting, but man, I absolutely love what these guys are doing. So, good on Arizona State there, and I do like this move as well. Logan Suber, he last season was over at Lipscomb. He goes over to Southeast Louisiana. He's a guy that was redshirted this last season, but he's got a nice ability to be able to dole out the ball, and that's big for Southeast Louisiana because Southeast Louisiana, year in and year out, they're solid in terms of generating turnovers, are a good defensive team, and they just leave a lot to be desired with regards to their perimeter offense. Now, you didn't see a lot of minutes over at Lipscomb a few seasons ago, but I think that he's going to be able to help out in terms of a lot of these, shall we say, deficiencies of Southeast Louisiana, and they have been busy the last few weeks. They bring in a trio of guys, Gio Sanford, Ashley Sims, along Quincy Allen, on over from Bryant, Tybo Bailey. I thought it was a nice add. J.J. Mascoy was about a 10 or so point per game score over at UMass Lowell, so I like what these guys are doing. Tyler Rolson as well. They still leave something to be desired with that three-point shooting, so we'll see if they're able to get a little bit more on that front, but I do think that they're making some nice moves here. Abdul Fantakaba, he was over at Western Carolina this last season, about 4.5 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. He's decided that he's going to be going on over to Seton. Seton has clearly been trying to be able to beef up their three-point shooting after it was atrocious last season. This is a team that under Shaheen Allway, though, you know that they're going to be prioritizing playing good, rock-solid defense, trying to be able to win the battle on the glass. Bringing in Simeon Wilcher, Kareem Thomas, obviously helps out the backcourt. Devin Williams at 6'10", he helps out down low from Florida Atlantic. And Meyer Wool at 6'8", they added him about 48 or so hours ago. I really like what Seton is building. Now, Fantakaba is probably going to be more of a reserve. If you're relying upon him to be your main big man out there in the Big East, you're going the wrong way down a one-way street, especially with the likes of DePaul, Xavier, Providence, all these teams beefing up. You know that St. John's and UConn are going to be good this season, but I like the moves that they're making, so that's big. And then you've got Pat Curtin. He was over at Bucknell last season, and he was rock solid over at Bucknell this last season. He was averaging about 13 points, 4.5 boards, steal and a half per contest. He decides that he's going to be adding on over to IUND. His active hand should work very well with this IUND system. He's got some good versatility. Now for IUND, they have not had a lot of additions here in the offseason, mainly because I think that there's a lot of guys that aren't going to be daring enough to be able to run that style. And for Curtin, the one thing that is a kryptonite to him, he's going to be a part of a team that is very much based around guard play, and he only shoots about 27% from three-point range, so they're going to need to get a little bit more three-point shooting. IUND did lose some of their main guys from seasons ago as well, but I do think that you're number 2 for IUND in just an absolutely harebrained, ridiculous style. Probably going to be looking a little bit better than this past year. I think think that their experimentation probably led to maybe some adjustments here for this upcoming season, but for UND, they're also bringing in Jason Clark, who was over at Appalachian, Gus Etchinson. He should be able to make some nice contributions coming on over from Idaho State as well. So I like what they're doing here. UT Rio Grande Valley has been making the most of a bad situation. They lose their coach in the offseason, but I like this pickup for them. They're going to be getting Jace Posey. He last season was playing over at TCU, and he was a solid player for TCU last year. 4.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. Now, he's a 6'5", little bit of a combo player that just absolutely does not shoot it from three-point range. Career less than 25% three-point shooter, but for UTSA, even though it's been a little bit of a rough go of it for them because you have to replace much of the roster from a season ago, I feel like they've been able to make the most out of it for this UT Rio Grande Valley team. I do think that they're once again going to be pretty rock solid on the defensive side of things, and for Grand Valley, it took them a little bit of time to be able to get the ball up and running because they had to do a coaching search for things first, but you know what? It feels like they've really been able to do a nice job here. They retained Always Right, one of the guys from last season. They've poached a few teams from the Southland, like BB Knight coming on over from Lamar. You've got Jeffeth Martinez, this is Big South, but he comes over from USC Upstate. Devin Pryor going from Oregon. UT Rio Grande Valley is out there. They're spending. Even though they do have a little bit of regime change, it's clear that they want to continue to build on that upper momentum that they had last season, and I think that they're going to be able to do so. So I really like this move for them. David Simon, he was over at Vermont last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to West Georgia. Now for West Georgia, they had a guy that I really liked in Sheldon Williams-Dryden last season, if I'm not mistaken. He's out of eligibility, so that leaves them at a little bit of a standstill down low for Simon. Last season over at Vermont, he just wasn't really a fit with that system. 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. Go back 2 seasons ago when he was over at San Diego, though. About 5 points, 2.5 boards. He was able to give you a darn near a block per contest, and for West Georgia, they don't necessarily have a ton of transfers up on the board. A lot of these guys that they're looking at, these are non-D1 guys, but I do think that this is going to be a good ad for them. They're also going to be bringing in Amir Williams, who was over at Hofstra last season, so they've added a little bit of guard play. Now they're able to address the low post play a little bit more as well, so I do think that they're taking some steps in the right direction. Still probably going to be a little bit rough for them out there in the Atlantic Sun, but I felt like low-key they added themselves a pretty solid season, and it's pretty solid what we're seeing in college basketball right now. We've got ourselves a lot that is happening in this great sport, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, maybe does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks to Rob Donaldson once again for joining me in last segment. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the offseason, we're taking a look at the news and notes that we're getting in college basketball. And once these rosters get solidified, I'm going to give you guys a specialized conference preview edition podcast for every single of these conferences. And then once we get in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back to you. Let's get them out. Thank you.